Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee. Can I remind members of the process? Item 1 on the agenda, minutes, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? If so, can you type them in? If not, no declaration of interest. Thank you. Item 2 on the agenda is urgent business. Nothing has been brought to my attention. Item 3, therefore, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies, Mrs. Rich?
No, I haven't received any, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. For the benefit of those new to the committee and for visitors, I'll make 1 or 2 introductions. I'm John Walsh, Chair of the Planning Committee for this municipal year. Vice Chairman is Councillor Hayes, and we also have with us this afternoon Alex Allen, the Development Manager, Nicola Raby from Legal Department, Vicky Reid from Democratic Services, and in support Helen Williams, the Planning Officer, who will deal with the specific points on the first application on the agenda. Item 4, therefore, minutes of the previous meeting.
Move them, Chair.
They have been moved and seconded. I take it there is no dissent.
Chair, sorry, can I just come in there because I've got 2 people who are admitting into the lobby who have admitted into the meeting, but we just need to sort of establish who they are.
All right, we will adjourn the meeting for a minute whilst you do that, please.
Sorry, the 2 people who have admitted into the meeting, could you let us know who you are, please?
I'm Paul Sedgwick.
Paul Sedgwick, yeah, thank you, the supporter. And?
I'm Debbie Newall.
Ah, right.
Thank you.
Debbie, sorry, you're for the next one, you're not for the 2 o'clock one, are you? That's fine.
Right, shall I go and then you ring me later? Is that, I'm not sure what I'm doing.
Yeah, that'd be fine. I'll ring you as soon as we get to your application.
Thank you. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. So, that being the case, we come therefore to item 5, the planning applications. And Mr. Sedgwick, you've heard me say this before, I apologise, but the benefit of other members of the public who may be with us, to remind you that the process is that Mrs. Williams, in the first instance for the application, will introduce the application, and I will then invite any ward councillors who are recorded to speak for up to 5 minutes. The objector will then be invited to speak for up to 3 minutes and take questions from the members of the committee. Following that, the supporter will speak for 3 minutes and be asked to take any questions. I'll then invite members to pose any questions directly to officers before opening the matter up for debate. The first application this afternoon, therefore, is the Regent Park Golf Club, Links Road, Lostock. And Mrs. Williams, I believe you are dealing with this one.
Thank you, Chair. Members are politely requested to also have consideration of the information contained within the schedule of supplementary information, as well as within the officer's report for this one. The proposal seeks to remodel the driving range at the golf club. The proposed remodelling works would alter the existing levels of the range by mainly raising them at the southern end and through the formation of a landscaped bund around the periphery of the range. The applicant is proposing the works primarily to improve the drainage of the range, which is currently poor and costly for the applicants, and to enable the high nets and pylons around the range to be removed, and also to improve the design and length of the range for a better customer experience. The proposed works would require the importation of some 85,000 cubic metres of inert soil. Owing to the amount of material to be imported, the applicant would require an environmental permit from the Environment Agency. This would mean that the Environment Agency would be the body responsible for controlling and monitoring the importation of material, rather than the council. The applicant has estimated that the proposed works would take between 10 and 12 months to complete. Hours of working and importation would be restricted to between 9 AM and 5 PM Mondays to Fridays. Officers consider that the proposed development would not constitute inappropriate developments in the Greenbelt. Whilst there would be a visual effect, and one that would be harmful whilst the engineering works were being carried out, the completed works would preserve the openness of the Greenbelt, and the proposed continuation of a sporting use would not conflict with the purposes of the Greenbelt. There would be a short-term medium harm on the landscape character and appearance of the area following the removal of a significant number of trees within and bordering the driving range, and whilst the replacement trees and shrubs are growing and maturing. Members are therefore advised to give some planning weights to this in their decision making. However, once the proposed replacement trees and shrubs have matured, officers do not consider that the completed redevelopment would harm the landscape quality and character of the area. HGVs delivering the imported material would have to enter via Links Road from Chorley New Road. Neighbouring residents will experience a degree of noise disturbance during the construction periods by virtue of the daily number of HGV movements that are anticipated. This short to medium term disturbance should therefore be given some planning weight by members in their decision taking. The disturbance will, however, be temporary, with working hours being restricted to between 9 AM and 5 PM on weekdays, and with the works expected to take up to a year to complete. The Council's pollution control officers have not objected to the proposal, but recommend conditions to restrict the hours of operation, the length of time the applicant has to import the material onto the site, which would be for up to 10 months, and dust mitigation measures such as the sheeting of vehicles, damping down of material on site, and having a wheel wash facility on the site. The Council's highways engineers have also not objected to the proposal. They agree with the submitted transport statement that the traffic impact from the construction works could be accommodated with minimal additional detriment to the operational capacity of the surrounding highway and with limited additional highway safety risk. Engineers are however recommending that prior to the commencement of development, the applicant submits a traffic management plan, which would require the applicant to consider how any potential conflict between HGVs and other road users could be managed. For instance, this could include temporary traffic lights, a cordoned off area for pedestrians, and/or a specific route for incoming and outgoing vehicles. In terms of the surface water drainage of the range, the proposed remodelling is intended to improve the existing situation. When rainwater from within the range would now be directed towards the existing pond, which would help to avoid the reported plugging of golf balls. The outflow of the pond would be as existing, which is through an elevated restricted pipe, which enters the existing golf course drainage system and then flows into Middlebrook. As reported within this schedule of supplementary information, the proposed remodelling works would not increase the amount of water entering the existing drainage system, as the amount of water able to enter the system is restricted by the size of the pipe. In periods of extreme rainfall, if the drain from the pond is unable to deal with the excess water, the area around the pond would flood, not the surrounding golf course, as the bunds would contain the water within the range. On balance, it's considered that the short to medium term harm caused during the construction period of the proposed development to the amenity of neighbouring residents and to the landscape character would not carry great enough weight, as the harm is temporary in nature, to justify a refusal, given that officers considered that the completed development would fully comply with development plan policies. Members are therefore recommended to approve this application subject to the recommended conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. I'm going to adjourn the meeting for a short time because I'm told that the link to the website is not operating and we've been asked to allow officers time to reconnect. So I will adjourn the meeting until such time as that is done. Thank you.
Chair, I can confirm now that the link is now on the website, so it is now going live. I don't know whether you want Helen to briefly repeat what she said earlier, just in case members of the public are listening in.
Thank you very much for that. It will be helpful, I think, for members and for anyone who's joined us, if you could perhaps just summarise very briefly the points you made, Mrs. Williams. Sorry to land that one on you.
Okay, just to summarise the introduction I previously did for members. It's been explained that the proposals seeking the remodelling of the driving range primarily to improve the existing drainage of the driving range. This will involve the importation of some 85,000 cubic metres of inert soil. The applicant's estimating that the works would take between 10 and 12 months to complete, with the hours of working and importation to be restricted to between 9 AM and 5 PM, Mondays to Fridays. As previously explained, officers consider that the proposed development doesn't constitute an appropriate development within the green belt for the reasons discussed within the report. It's recognised that there would be a short to medium term harm on the landscape character and appearance of the area following the removal of the significant number of trees within the site, and also whilst the replacement trees and shrubs are growing and maturing, and members have been advised to give that some weight. However, it's considered that once the replacement trees and shrubs have matured, the completed proposal would not harm the character and appearance of the area. It's been explained that HGV movements HGVs would need to go down Links Road via Chorley New Road to import the material, and it's been recognised by officers that there is going to be a level of noise disturbance to those residents neighbouring the property, owing to the number of vehicles that would be using Links Road on a daily occurrence. This has been recognised as a short-term medium disturbance, and therefore again should be given some weight by members in the decision making. However, as the disturbance would be temporary, with working hours to be restricted and for the works to take up to a year, officers do not consider that there would be an eventual detrimental harm to neighbouring residents, and it should be noted that our pollution control officers have raised no objections, subject to a number of conditions that are listed in the officer's report. Likewise, Council's highways engineers have not objected to the proposal. However, they're recommending that the applicants, prior to commencement of development, submit a traffic management plan, which would require the applicant to consider how any potential conflicts between HGVs and other road users could be managed. And it's concluded on balance that the short to medium term harm caused by during the construction period of the proposed development to the amenity of neighbouring residents and to landscape character would not carry great enough weight, as the harm would be temporary in nature, to justify a refusal in this situation, given that officers considered that the completed development would fully comply with development plan policies. Members are therefore recommended to approve this application subject to the recommended conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that summary, Ms. Williams. Can I now invite the supporter for the application, Mr. Sedgwick, please, to address the meeting. As you know, you have 3 minutes to address the meeting and then to take any questions from members.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Sedgwick.
As there's no objections, I can keep this quite brief. What I'd say is that the driving range is the economic heart of the golf centre and works to ensure that its remit from the council of providing a golf facility that's open to the public at reasonable cost can be achieved. As golf skills and equipment have been improved, the driving range no longer provides sufficient scope to accommodate the practice needs of golfers. In particular, it's too short and does not have sufficient elevation so that balls can be tracked. From a management viewpoint, Gradients and internal drainage need to be increased so that driven balls do not plug into the turf and get lost. And the peripheral nets on large pylons are an unattractive feature in the green belt and are difficult and costly to maintain. To deal with these matters, the application proposes to import some 85,000 cubic metres of inert fill so the range can be elevated and extended, and planted bunds around it will replace the nets with a visually much more attractive screen. Some 3,500 trees and shrubs will be planted around the range to achieve this. We accept there will be a short-term impact locally while the material is imported and landscape works undertaken. The disturbance will be kept to a minimum in the interest of residents and golfers, and the operating hours restricted to the working week with this in mind. I think I can conclude then by saying that the scheme is a major enhancement of this public golf facility. Once completed, it will significantly improve the quality of the golfing offer and underpin the viability of the facility into the long term. This is the benefit against which the short-term impacts are to be judged. I can therefore commend the application to the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Sedgwick. I've got two questions to you at the moment, please. And I've got three. Councillor Hayes, first of all.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Sedgwick. The question is in relation to paragraph 41 of the report about the imported material. Is it going to be soil, or is it any of it going to be rubble? The concern I think the officers have is that the bunds, if it's mainly rubble, the trees may not be able to establish, and we may lose quite a lot of them. Can you satisfy us on that, please?
Yes, I can. There's not going to be rubble. This is all clean soils and construction works.
Thank you. Councillor Darvesh.
Just waiting for the red box. Chair, thank you. We used to see in planning applications for golf courses, golf clubs, which it's to do with development, which enhances, but not only enhances, secures the financial stability. So I think I recall an application here last time where it was a restaurant and a function room, and I think the whole idea was to create some sort of additional financial stream for its viability. So I'm just wondering, in terms of what's actually been created here compared to the impact with the neighbours and everything else, how can you demonstrate how this golf club will become much more financially sustainable by creating a better golfing range? I mean, does the number of bays increase? I can't understand where the additional income stream will come from, especially after losing, say, 12 months worth of income stream from the golf range itself. Thank you.
Fine, taking it a bit outside my planning remit, but I do have an understanding of how this works. At the moment, the range, the improvement of golf equipment and technique means that the range is too short. It will become less and less attractive to people who want to challenge themselves, see how far they can drive. I know from walking around the range, there's a lot of golf balls driven out, particularly at the far end, showing how short the range is compared to the modern skills and equipment of golfers. So unless they can get a better experience at the range, they're not going to continue to come. So there's a loss of trade there, and a lot of, particularly among people who are more experienced and more capable of using the range to its full. So I think that is, and also making it a much more attractive range where they can see where the balls are landing, even at a distance, I think is just going to keep the range relevant in a time of changed golfing. And it is a very competitive environment as well, because there's so many golf courses around Bolton's Edge. We all know, how many there are. And this is one that is actually not a membership club. It's open to the public and is additionally beneficial in that way, and needs good attention to keep it functioning without its membership income. Does that help?
Just sorry, Chair. It was just one thing. Does it increase the number of users? I mean, would the number of cubicles actually increase?
There's no change to the number of cubicles, but it's quite likely that they would be used more intensively, and also it will head off any drop-off in usage by upgrading the facility.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Cedric. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Cedric, it's been suggested to me as one of the ward councillors that this scheme really is nothing more than a money-making scheme from the income that will be generated from the landfill site, which is estimates from anything from £200,000–300,000 to £500,000. So what do you say to the suggestion that it really isn't about the driving range, it's about that income from the landfill?
I mean, my understanding is that the landfill is what funds the enhancement of the range. So it's not just grabbing some money and running. The range will take a considerable amount of effort and continuing expenditure to get to the intended condition, and that is what is in hand. Yes, there's a profit to be made by the contractor, but there's no indication that there's any excessive profit, and I know that they're working to keep the costs down. So I don't think that's a material consideration here.
Thank you. Councillor Sherrington.
Thank you, Chair. What I want to ask is relating to point 41. It seems that the landscape officer has actually said that he has concerns about the proximity of each individual tree towards another tree, and obviously if they're planted too close together, then it could have an impact on the actual life of the tree. I just wanted to ask, really, as the supporter, has he looked at this, the report, and has he taken what the officer has said? Has he taken that on board when doing the landscape that he's going to put forward to the authority? Thank you.
Well, we've had landscape architects provide a landscaping scheme. There's a lot of planting proposed, and it's quite usual to plant trees much closer than they will need once they've grown, and then through management thin them out. But this helps protect them from the weather, it helps them grow, it forces them upwards so they get height. There will be a continual management function in there to make sure the right trees thrive in the right places. And just to reinforce that, there's a condition that requires us to look again at the landscaping details. So I'm happy that what would happen is as much planting as possible would go on the bums, rather than it being any idea that the planting is only going to be sparse. So I think going for the maximum is as much as one can hope for.
So can I just come back, Chair? So therefore, sorry. So therefore, are you saying that you're going to take notice of the landscape officer of the authority?
Oh, yeah, always. Yes.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask the agent? Obviously, you're looking at 3,500 items to be planted. Can you give me information on the size of these? Are we looking at width, basically, to be planted on the site? And if they are widths, would the possibility of any more standard sized trees be considered to give an earlier build-up of tree cover? Thank you.
To be honest, I can't recall the specification of the planting is in the landscape officer's report. Sorry, in the landscape consultant's report. The trouble is with planting larger trees, they quickly get overtaken by those that are planted as whips. So it would be a very short-term benefit, and it's probably not worthwhile, as it were, to plant the larger trees. However, you know, we can always take a view on that in discharging the planning condition about the future landscape, about the landscaping scheme. So I'd be happy to look at that again in that context.
Thank you, Mr. Sedgwick. That's the whole of questions, so thank you very much for your attendance.
Right,
can I therefore invite members' questions to officers? And I've got 2 indications thus far. Councillor Hayes.
Thank you, Chair. The question to officers really is very similar to the question I asked the supporter. It's the Environment Agency, I understand, who will be controlling what comes in. There is an element that obviously there's some money to be made, or some supporting of the costs of the development from the landfill. How are we actually going to make sure that it is good quality soil that comes in, that's suitable for trees, and that a lot of it isn't actually rubble?
Thank you, Councillor. As hopefully it's explained within the committee report, because it would be the responsibility of the Environment Agency to monitor and enforce any importation material. It would be for the Environment Agency to ensure that the material coming on is safe and is suitable for the end use. I'm pretty certain that the applicant needs to provide testing reports of the material that is imported on site and provide those to the EA. And I'm also sure that the EA does undertake on-the-spot inspections, so they go and inspect the sites without the applicant's warning. That's part of the licensing programme that the applicant needs to be involved with. The council is also suggesting a condition as well that we have sight of the testing certificates for the material. That's one of the suggested conditions within the officer's report. Sorry, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but that is a suggested condition as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Howarth.
Thank you, Chair. So items 41 and 42 are in the report where tree officers have given views. Thank you, where you've included that, and they're asking for the additional condition. What I wanted to ask officers, I don't know if we've got a tree officer with us. Okay. Officers feel that there's not enough space for the layout of those 3,500 new trees, it said in the report. So I wanted just to try and get a sense of whether the officers feel that we'll end up with, say, trees less by, say, 30% because of layout, something around 2,500. I just wanted to try and get an understanding, really, of how low do they think the numbers might be. What sort of a difference are they going to be looking for? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, so I'm unable to answer the question about how many trees the officers do believe could be accommodated within the site. I presume that wouldn't be understood until we actually saw an amended landscape scheme to the densities that our landscape officers had in mind, rather than the density that the applicant is currently proposing.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Mystery.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. I was just looking at the late list. Under the lease agreement with the council over this golf course, which was signed in 2016, the applicant is required to get consent from the council before they carry out this work. Has that been granted? Can you hear me?
Hi, yes, sorry. I believe that the consent would need to be sought following any approval of planning permission. I believe that's the process that members might be minded to approve. Say if members were minded to approve this application, then the tenants would need to get further consent from the council in order to carry out those works. Thank you.
Yeah, good, sorry. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Sherrington.
Thank you, Chair. It's questions to the officers. I've asked the supporter about the situation with the landscaping, and it's quite strange this, because you've got a supporter there who will know exactly how many trees are taken out and bushes and so on, but don't seem to know what kind of trees or whatever, and yet there is some of that information is actually in the report. So I'm just a little bit concerned about what will actually happen regarding the landscaping and the fact of how many trees are going to be put there. And I do have concerns about if they're all stuck in as whips, you know, you'll wait another 20 years before they've grown, you know. So I just wondered what the landscape officer from the authority is going to do regarding working with the people who are doing this job to make sure that they finish up with a really good landscape. And the thing is, because they're taking away a very good landscape to do all this work, so really they owe it to the people who live around there to actually put back a really good landscape. So I was just wondering what will happen now if we've got a supporter who's really wishy-washy about whether it's a tree or a whip or whatever it is that they're going to put in, or, you know, what kind of, and how many are going to die and how many are not, and, you know, it would appear they're quite happy for a few to die, you know, before they've even been put in. I just wonder how much the landscape officer will work with them and how much this supporter will take notice of their landscape officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I just begin with trying to explain the current situation. There's going to be approximately 31 individual trees and 9 groups of trees that are going to be lost within the development to accommodate the imported material and the remodelling of the course. The applicant's currently proposing 3,500 trees to replace, so that's significantly greater number of vegetation than currently on site. So even if those densities cannot be achieved, there's going to be a significant enhancement and a net gain in biodiversity as an outcome of this application. We've recommended that a condition is imposed for an amended landscaping scheme, which means that our qualified landscape architects will have to have sight of and also approve any amended landscaping scheme put forward by the applicant before development can commence. I would advise councillors that our officers within the landscape department are qualified landscape architects, so they're in a very, very good position to understand what's required for that site and what trees would be suitable for that area, and for us also the types of soil perhaps that will be imported on the site. I think that's probably all I can really say, but I personally have confidence in our landscape officers that would be able to secure a very good high quality scheme there.
Thanks Helen. I never had any doubt about our landscape officers. That was not my remit at all. It's not them that I worry about. I know that they are good at their job. It's what pressure that they're put on by other people, like the supporters. So thank you anyway, Helen. Thank you.
Councillor Darvish.
Thank you, Chair. It's about financial viability again. I'm just, has the client actually indicated that the money that they're likely to make from this operation, this tipping operation, is going to be going back into the golf club itself to secure its financial viability? And is that actually a material consideration? I'm just wondering, you know, they could actually make a lot of money and spend it and run this operation into the ground, the business into the ground.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't actually recall seeing anything within the planning statement as to where money from the imported material would go or would be spent within the golf course. However, as you've acknowledged that the material, the money that they would get from the imported material isn't actually a material planning consideration within this the determination of this application. Therefore, it's something that officers shouldn't really be considering. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's all the questions. We come then to the matter being open for debate, and I'm going to start on this one. Exercise my right. I've got to say I do have some very real concerns about the application. 85,000 cubic metres is a lot of infill, and looking at paragraph 66 of the report, which talks about initially 31 vehicle movements an hour, that means a vehicle coming in and out, both way, two-way movement, one every 8 minutes. If it rises to the 60 an hour, which is talked about, that's a vehicle in and out less than every 4 minutes, which is a tremendous number of vehicle movements, even at the lower end of the scale, for a 10 to 12 month period. And I think that in itself is something that causes me some concern. I know reference is made to loads being covered, sheeted, and to wheel wash, but experience to my mind shows that even those measures are never sufficiently adequate to ensure the cleanliness of the highway. And you know, with a major road, Trolling Road, heavily trafficked, and any materials, any debris on that road, I think would be a potential traffic hazard. That causes me some concern. I share the views voiced by a number of members about the quality of the infill, and I appreciate that Environment Agency have got some control over this. But if the infill is not of sufficient quality, and the officer's report picks up on it, there is no guarantee that a 3,500 whips, trees, shrubs, whatever they may be, will flourish. And we are in danger of losing some mature trees already. I know 31 individuals have been mentioned, but there are a number of groups of trees also referred to. So you're going to lose some mature trees from the site at the risk of long-term diminution of the quality of the landscape and the visual impact of the course. A justification argument for it is that the range is not long enough, nets and whatever. But nets are a suitable alternative, and it would be possible to keep the driving range open with nets. So I don't see this as being a be-all and end-all. I think we've got to, in fairness, look at the impact on residents. 12 months, 10 to 12 months minimum, is a very long time for a number of vehicular movements to which I referred from the report. And I'm concerned overall about the enforceability of some of the conditions. I appreciate that condition 5 in the report, officer's recommendation, is that soil testing would be part of that process. But I am concerned about that. I'm concerned that whilst we have some protection as it's a leasehold, and we are at the end of the day, it's our land, it's within the council's control. I am concerned about the enforceability of a number of the conditions, and that does concern me. There's an argument that actually we've got more power with the lease than we have with on the planning conditions, and that. But again, it's down to enforcement, and I have real concerns. I'm going to keep it short, but Mrs. Williams in the presentation said it's an unbalanced decision, and I'm going to be quite clear about it. I think on balance, this would be a bad application. It would be difficult to enforce, and I'm not convinced that it is absolutely necessary. And I'm therefore, from the chair, going to move a refusal. I've now got Councillor Peel wishes to speak.
Chairman, I think Councillor Morgan indicated first.
I'm sorry. I thought it was a question from Councillor Morgan. My apologies. Councillor Morgan, sorry.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Nick. Our officers at Helen mentioned that the Highways Department didn't think there'd be an impact on the highways. Well, those of us that live that side of town and who go daily onto Chorley New Road between sort of 7:30 and 10, and then coming out from Bolton, going home between sort of 3:30 and 6, that road is chocker as it is. And to have that amount of additional heavy goods vehicles turning onto Chorley New Road would be very detrimental to the highways. And I think members need to remember as well that Links Road is an unadopted road. It's maintained by the residents and the golf club, I have to admit. So, you know, it's really not up to scratch to take that sort of level of movement. So I do really have some highway concerns. Also, Helen mentioned about the part of the reasoning for the application was to ease the water base around that area. Well, as ward members, we have to annually literally bully the club through our legal department to clear the gullies that they've got, and that's what's causing a lot of flooding. So I've got no confidence at all that they will, you know, this will ease that, because they're not doing what they should be doing now. And I think, like Councillor Walsh just mentioned, during the 12 months, and it could be considerably longer, considering we're in the biggest recession or moving into the biggest recession that we know, it could be considerably longer to get the amount of landfill needed to make the site up to what they want to do with it. So it could be a lot longer than 12 months, 18 months that the residents would have to suffer the inconvenience of these vehicles. So I would support refusal on the basis that I think it's completely inappropriate for in Greenbelt, because it's, with I think a couple of members have suggested the reason for this is it for the range, or is it for income to the club? And I'll also say that the detrimental impact to the public during the construction phase of it. But if members weren't minded to support it, which I hope they won't, hope they'll support refusal, would it be possible, or is it possible to condition that Links Road be brought up to an adoptable standard at the end of the site construction, and then the council formally adopt the road thereafter? But I will definitely second refusal, but if members are minded to approve, then I would like to consider adding that condition. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. Councillor Peel.
Thanks, Chair. Honestly, I know people do say this, but I honestly wasn't going to speak on this because I actually thought reading the report it was reasonably straightforward, but I detected from the line of questions and then your opening statement, Chair, that it's not as straightforward as I thought it was. I understand Councillor Morgan's coming at it from a ward councillor and he's concerned about quality of life of residents during construction, but I did get concerned part of the meeting that some of the questions really weren't planning questions, and I think we do need to avoid that. We have to remember it's a planning application, which is described in the report that we're dealing with, and I thought the quality of the infill, which you yourself raised, Chair, I think has been addressed adequately, and Alex Allen has confirmed in the chat that soil testing is included in condition 5. If we don't have confidence in our officers, and if we don't have confidence in the Environment Agency, that's a different matter. That's not reason to refuse something. And I did get concerned by your comments, Chair, where you seem to cast doubt on our ability as a planning authority to enforce conditions. I think you actually said that. Again, that does worry me, that if the chairman of the planning committee is worried about the ability of his officers to enforce conditions, we really are in dangerous territory when it comes to dealing with planning applications. So I didn't make many notes because I wasn't expecting to speak. They were the main points I wanted to make, but this type of development is quite commonplace for the maintenance of the green belt. As we know, there's quite a huge amount of greenbelt space, not just in Bolton, but across the country, that's actually golf course designation, and it's one of the ways that greenbelt is maintained, and it's kept in quite a nice condition, because by the nature of a golf course, you have to maintain it, and it creates these contours and tree planting, etc. I did get the impression that what the applicant was proposing to plant, 3,500 trees and shrubs, was above and beyond what we would have told them to do. So if that's the case, that could do with being confirmed. I did understand in response to Councillor Morgan that there were conditions about not only resurfacing Links Road after the work's complete, but during. So maybe that can be confirmed as well, but I think he might have said adoptable standards. That'll be up to his colleague Councillor Haslam, whether he wants to adopt this road, and so the council takes on the maintenance. And my final point is, I always struggle with arguments. I understand them, but I always struggle with arguments that in planning whereby whilst the building's going on, whilst the HGV's movement is going on, whatever the planning application we're dealing with, there is going to be disruption. There's always going to be disruption. It is one of those things that we have to take for granted in planning. We don't argue when somebody wants to build a house that we should refuse it because the neighbours will be disrupted. We don't argue when somebody wants to build 100 new houses that we should refuse it because people on the adjoining roads will be disrupted. And again, I think I respect the fact that Councillor Morgan's sticking up for his constituents, but again, I think that is very dodgy ground to be refusing an application. When I read the report, I was in favour of it, and I remain in favour of it. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Peel. Councillor Hayes.
Thank you, Chair. I can see the benefits to the club. I can see the benefits to the wider community of making sure the golf club remains financially viable. No argument about that. I am concerned about whether the trees would survive. We're taking an awful lot of trees out. We're putting a lot of trees in, but they're immature trees, and we have to be 100% sure about the quality of where they're put. So I'm a little bit worried about that. Also, I take a lot of account of the fact that Chorley New Road is probably one of the busiest roads, if not the busiest road in Bolton. Recent reports in the Bolton News also pointed out it was the most dangerous road in Bolton for motorists. And I think that the number of vehicles that could potentially be going backwards and forwards, carrying the infill, is going to have a massive effect on the residents. It's an unbalanced decision. I can see the arguments of Councillor Peel. I think he makes some very good points. But on balance, I will be supporting refusal of this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Darby.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, this type of development is actually appropriate in the Greenbelt. We all understand that. For me, it's the user experience, increasing the user experience. It's an individual will be, it's actually on the driving range, so you're not even experiencing 18 holes walking around the golf course. This is just that bit of experience on the driving range. It does actually increase the number of users on the driving range as well. So for me, very simple, the development does not outweigh the short-term impact on the residents and the medium-term impact on the landscaping. That's why I'll be supporting refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Ayub.
Thank you, Chair. I was thinking that it's probably a straightforward one, but listening to the debate and questions, I actually agree with Councillor Morgan about the congestion on the new Chorley New Road. I would suggest that if we are wanting to approve, or if we approve it, I think the vehicle movement should be from 9:30 till 4:30, if that could be conditioned. Thank you.
Thank you. I've no further indication of speakers. Therefore, it has been moved and seconded that this application is refused. Members are therefore voting for refusal or against refusal. Mrs. Ridge, can we take the vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. So, Councillor Ayub?
Against.
Against refusal.
Yeah.
Councillor Connor?
For.
Councillor Darvish?
For.
Councillor Dean?
For.
Councillor Howarth?
Against.
Councillor Hayes?
For.
Councillor Hornby?
For.
Councillor Mistry?
No. Against.
Councillor Morgan?
For.
Councillor Peel?
Against.
Councillor Radcliffe?
For.
Councillor Sanders?
For.
Councillor Sherrington?
Against.
Councillor Walsh?
For.
Councillor Waters, oh sorry, Councillor Waters is not here. Councillor Wilkinson?
For.
Councillor Wright?
For.
The application is refused.
Thank you. The application refused. Mr. Allen, just to clarify the points for refusal, it's the impact on the residential properties and local residences. It's the volume of traffic on Chorley New Road. I think those are the two major points.
I think, yeah, I mean, to the the short-term impact on the landscape, is that in terms of the
yes.
Yeah.
Members happy with those? Thank you. We come then to the second application of the bundle, which is Chorley New Road, Horwich, on page 29. This
Chair.
is the citing. Sorry, yes.
Sorry, Chair, can I just check that we've got both Councillor Sylvester and Councillor Brady in the meeting now, as they are speaking as ward councillors?
Yes, Vicky, I'm here.
Councillor Brady?
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you.
So the application is for the siting of a new 20-metre high phase 7 monopole mast at Chorley Road. This is the matter we had before us at the previous occasion. Mr. Allen, I think you're presenting this one.
That's correct, Chair. Thank you. I'll just keep it extremely short and sweet. It got deferred, members will recall, at a previous planning committee in July to allow the applicant to provide look at alternative sites, suggested some of them which were suggested by members at the meeting, and also look to see whether they could reduce the number of cabinets associated with the proposal. As outlined in the background section on page 30 and 31, the applicant has done that, specifically because as the proposal is a replacement, they wouldn't actually have to justify looking at alternative sites, but they, as I say, they have done that, and that's the various sites are identified on the bullet points on page 31. Obviously, members can read that. Obviously, have read that at their leisure. We also asked them to clarify the number of cabinets, and as it is a site share and a 5G facility, unfortunately, there are more cabinets that are required, and it isn't possible to reduce the number at all, I'm afraid. So as I say, it is a replacement. It's been moved 9.5 metres to the west, and in effect it will be opposite the closest residential property, the same properties that as the existing one is, and the proposal is still recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. We now have two ward councillors to speak. First of whom, Councillor Sylvester. I remind you, Councillor Sylvester, you've got 5 minutes to address the committee.
Thank you, Chair. I spoke at the previous planning committee a month ago in opposition to this planning application because the proposed location site for the monopole and equipment cabinets is directly in front of residential properties. Nothing has changed in my opposition to this application since the last meeting. The application was deferred so that the applicant could look at alternative sites away from residential properties and for members of the public to suggest alternative sites to allow Horwich Town Council to discuss the application. Horwich Town Council did that last month at their planning meeting on Thursday the 23rd of July, and Horwich Town Council recommended refusal of the application. However, your planning report has not been updated to show this information. I put forward 3 alternative sites to the planning department for the applicant to look at and consider. The applicant has considered 2 of these. They have discounted a site share to the rear of the Texaco garage close by, saying that there is not enough room to house all of the equipment cabinets. Just imagine all of those, therefore, at the present proposed location site in front of the residential properties. Another alternative site, which I proposed to the rear of Horwich Carpets, has also been discounted because it does not provide required coverage, even though this is in close proximity. I find that rather strange. The third alternative site which I proposed was on the Fowler Industrial Estate, where there's an area to the left-hand side and also an area to the rear of the units, which could be used to locate the monopole and equipment cabinets. The applicant has not considered this alternative site or made any comment on it. Fowler Industrial Estate is owned by Bolton Council, so I asked the question, has an approach from the applicant been made to the council? Neither has the applicant considered or made any comments on an alternative location put forward by a resident near to the Royal Mail sorting office on Mansell Way on the Middlebrook. There on Mansell Way, to the rear of the pavement, is a grass area which could locate everything with no residential properties around. Neither has the applicant looked at any other areas of the local work site. Interestingly, despite the planning committee asking the applicant to look at alternative sites away from residential properties, 4 out of the 8 alternative sites considered were discounted because they were detrimental to residential properties. Why therefore look at a site and discount it because it is in front of residential properties, when the idea was that the applicant should be looking at sites away from residential properties. The best the applicant has come up with is to move the proposed location site a few metres sideways from the original site. However, this will still mean that the monopole and all of the equipment cabinets will still be directly in front of the same residential properties. So I am not impressed, and I do not believe that the applicant has taken the process seriously enough. For that reason, I am still asking you to refuse this application for the same reason which I mentioned last month to you, that planning application 08147/20 for a 20-metre high monopole on Green Lane in Great Lever Ward was refused just a few months ago in May of this year, because that monopole and equipment cabinets were proposed to be sited directly in front of residential properties. So this application, as like the Great Lever application, I believe is contrary to policies CG3 of Bolton's core strategy. The proposed 20-metre high monopole and wraparound cabinets at base would appear as a wholly incongruous and dominant feature that would be harmful to the residential setting and out of scale with its surroundings. That was the wording of the reason for refusal of the Great Lever application, and I hope that you will refuse this application with the same wording and reason. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sylvester. Councillor Brady, next to speak. Again, Councillor Brady, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. The existing mast was moved from the local works to its current location in 2018. That application was objected to as not appropriate for residential location. This current application wasn't discussed by Horwich Town Council as it didn't meet due to COVID in April, and as Councillor Sylvester has mentioned, it was rejected when we finally did get to discuss it in July. So treating this as a new application, which it is, all the sites that were put forward for consideration appear to be on public, not private land. Doesn't appear that any private land has even been looked at. The number of cabinets going from 2 to 8 will result in clutter and further adversely impact the street scene, and it should therefore be rejected for the same reasons as other applications in the borough have been rejected by this planning committee. Those were the ones on Green Lane, Bolton and Kersler Precinct, where this planning committee stated they were wholly incongruous, a dominant feature on the street scene and utilitarian in appearance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brady. We have no supporter or objector, and therefore it's question to officers. Councillor Peel.
Thank you, Chair. On page 34 of the report, it states that the council's telecoms consultant has made a comment and a technical consultee comment. Can I ask officers if there's a part of this report missing, because I keep going through it and I can't find the technical consultee section within the report. I seem to remember the original report, which was a paper copy, which I've since thrown away, did have the council's technical consultee on there. And the reason I raise it is that's really important, because we many years ago took a decision to get a consultee in so that we can challenge statements made by telecoms companies about cell coverage. So can I just get some clarification on that, please, Chair?
Mr. Allen, please.
Yes, the reference to technical consultees on page 36 in the representation section, it doesn't actually state what the consultee said, but obviously it says that we have, which isn't helpful for members, I know, but it does state that they have been consulted. I mean, I can, if you bear with me, I can just let you know what they've said if that's helpful.
It would be helpful, please, Mr. Allen.
Okay, yeah, no, bear with me a moment. Bear with me a moment, sorry. Apologies, I'll be with you in a minute. Okay, right. Yeah, they were consulted, responded on the 16th of April this year. Saying the site-specific document regarding proliferation hasn't been uploaded. It's not available on the council's website, so they're unable to comment on proliferation. Alternatives and need, that hasn't. They're saying the information that's not available on the online, so they can't comment. In terms of the design, they're saying the proposed installation is a standard design. It's now commonplace in many streetscapes. From a health and safety perspective, they're saying they've submitted a certificate of conformance with the ICNIRP guidelines, so obviously it doesn't represent any danger to health or safety. And that's all I pretty much say, to be honest. As I say, in terms of the proliferation and alternative sites, as it is a replacement, the applicant doesn't technically need to justify alternative sites. There is a site, as members be aware, that's extremely close to this, which is the same height, albeit a slightly different design. Thank you.
Chair, can I come back, please?
Yes.
Thank you. There seems to have been a bit of confusion here. Some of the things that Mr. Allen read out then are entirely within the remit of planning officers, the planning issues. We use the services of a technical consultee in relation to mobile phone mast applications because we as planning officers do not have the necessary technological expertise in terms of challenging or confirming the arguments made by telecoms applicants in relation to cell coverage. That's the specific thing. So often a planning member will say, well, why can't this mast go there? And the applicant will say, well, it can't go there because it doesn't, it won't have the coverage that we intend. And that's why we hire a company called Something Solutions, I can't remember what they're called, to actually verify that. Can I just ask then, Chair, has that job actually been done? Because that's really important.
Mr. Allen, you're on mute. Sorry, Mr. Allen, you're on mute.
Okay, yeah, no, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, so in this instance, yes, we have consulted them, and the comments, their comments, obviously I reiterated a short while ago. And we have considered, our officers have considered it, because, as I say, the applicant isn't required to justify in this case, because it is a replacement. The council can't query or ask for further justification. Obviously, we did, because obviously members requested that at the last meeting. In terms of the alternative locations, that's suggested by Councillor Sylvester. I said the Fowler Industrial Estate I can't really comment on, but the Middlebrook Estate is obviously, in terms of the cell coverage is quite sensitive. So I would have thought at least the Middlebrook Estate location isn't appropriate in this instance.
Thank you. Councillor Howard, did you want to ask a question at this stage, or did you want to speak in the debate?
No, Chair, speak in the debate. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Morgan, in that case, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question to officers, please. Both Councillor Sylvester and Councillor Brady referred to the applications in Great Lever and Kersley Precinct that were rejected. Can you clarify if they were for replacement poles or were they for new poles?
From recollection, I think that was a new site. It wasn't a replacement site, so it is technically different.
Thank you.
I'm bearing in mind that this installation would be outside the same house, and it isn't cheap by jowl. You know, it's not like terrace properties that bang up to the street. The house is overlooking the property, overlooking the mast would be our setback substantially.
Thank you, Councillor Sherrington.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to ask a couple of points, really. When it was moved from the local work site, was there anything put in there that indicated that it was only maybe for a temporary situation? Because I'm sure that if people had known it was going to stay there forever, then there would have been a lot more fuss made about it at that time. And also, everybody's talking about this replacement. If this was a house and it had been knocked down and you were putting another house up instead, you wouldn't be able to have it with so much more added to it. I mean, this is not just replacing the boxes that are there. There's a heck of a lot more boxes going to be there at the side of this mast. So it's not exactly what's going up in the sky that's the problem, as much as how much furniture is going with this particular mast, and it's well and above what is there at the moment. So to say that it's replacement, I just can't get my head around that, because I don't think it is replacement. So I'd like to ask the officers, when do we stop how big does it have to get before we actually stop calling it replacement? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor. Yeah. So yeah, the current site, the way it's located, was as you say, a relocation from the local works, and that obviously was to facilitate the residential development at the local works. That was the reason. So it wasn't a temporary solution. It was a permanent home, I suppose, for the telecoms mast. So yeah, when does a new mast become, well, it's changed from being a replacement to a new mast? Obviously, when it's in a drastically different location, I would say, and obviously officers clearly don't consider that it is a brand new location. Yeah, there is, to facilitate the change from 4G from the 4G technology to 5G, there has to be an increase in the number of cabinets. But that goes hand in hand with the technology, and there's, you know, there is nothing that nothing in any location that would require fewer cabinets, unfortunately.
Chair, can I just come back on that, please?
Yes.
I just want to ask, I mean, the question was, how many does it actually take? Because, well, in effect, what you're saying is, you know, if we finish up that we've got 10G or 20G or whatever it might finish up as, it won't, they can just stick as many boxes as they want around. So it could finish up with the whole of Charley Road having boxes all the way down, which will be all right because they say so and they've got it in the location they want. Am I to presume that is the case?
Councillor, it's clear from guidance in the MPPF that councils have to facilitate mobile technology, you know, the new 5G technology. I mean, but I suppose going back before mobile phones existed, you know, you perhaps members of the public and officers and members would have thought that, you know, to have say 2 or 3 cabinets alongside a mobile phone mast wouldn't have been appropriate. And obviously, probably back in the day, we probably did refuse applications on that basis. But obviously now, you know, we are where we are, and things move on. The environment changes and evolves, and you know, we have to evolve with it.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Councillor Ayub, please. Question. Councillor Ayub.
Chair, I think Councillor Ayub's left the meeting.
I was about to give him up. Thank you for that. Councillor Ayub, if you come back, we'll let you put a question immediately on your turn. Open therefore to debate. Councillor Howarth.
Thank you, Chair. When the application started, it was 065717, and that then was for prior approval. And that actually was at Stirling Industrial Estate, which is opposite Fowler Industrial Estate. And the documents for that application make it clear, Richard Newstead for the applicant, he described that without question as the best site in the area. Then the applicant had a clear commitment to keeping away from the front of residential properties. My view is in Horwich this should not be difficult. The previous prior approval by the Planning Authority was 07414/2018. Unfortunately, there isn't much of a neighbourhood consultation showing on the planning portal pertaining to that, and of course how that what's called prior approval planning decision came about is very interesting to this application. It certainly shows us that Horwich Town Council objected and Councillor Sylvester objected, and when he's come to committee he's told us about that. And it does say notification letters or letters were sent out to local addresses. That's not always the same as when letters go out that actually ask for views from residents. So that was about prior approval. Today, this is a full planning application now for this. We've heard that Horwich Town Council are against it. July 2020, Councillor Sylvester is against it. The sum, of course, is the summary is that they want an alternative site away from homes. That prior approval planning application and the approval given, that was a telecoms 56 days application. And for prior approval 56 days applications, they look to me like they're devolved to planning authorities across prior approvals for all of those types of applications. That meant that it was allowed to be cited there. I would say there's not much detail. I've tried, but I can't find much detail in today's bundle about that prior approval planning. Now the applicant, though, in pre-planning discussions, there were pre-planning discussions with the planning authority. That is clear from the paperwork. Damien Hoskins, in his letter 1st October 2018, clearly states that the applicant did have, before the prior approval, some pre-planning discussions with the planning authority. Is prior approval a material matter today? That's an interesting point. Commentary already suggests that it is a material matter, so I want to speak to that. You know, in layman's terms, the monopole is there. There are some cabinets there already, and in layman's terms, a case is made. Why should it not carry on then? But it's only one of the material matters today. My view presently is that prior approval may persuade those with devolved powers in planning But if the case has not been to a planning committee of elected members, which it hasn't, it's not been to us, then I think that it's a weak material matter, because this is a full planning application. So the argument that's put forward to say, well, there's already prior approval, that's not persuading me, because this is a full planning application. On prior approvals as well, in January 2020, this just adds weight to how much notice you're going to take of that prior approval. The High Court made a ruling in January 2020 on prior approvals, which are, they're called prior approvals 56 days notice. They're not all about telecoms prior approvals in planning, of course, they're about other things. But that judgment was very, very interesting, because it said, it gave direction to planning authorities and applicants that they could, without question, negotiate above those 56 days. The suggestion, of course, is days like that listed at 56 are arbitrary, and better practice can be found. So who knows? I mean, you know, that was January 2020, but who knows, with more dialogue on a prior approval case, with more dialogue, with more exploration of other sites, who knows where prior approvals will get to now going forward. How can just asking the applicant to look at other sites when the applicant wants this site be the answer? Perhaps members don't have much choice. These are the things they have to do. The planning authority has already given its own approval on the site as a prior approval. I thank those for raising the matter of the telecoms expert, if I can call them that, the consultant, sorry, that's the better word, Company Solutions. What of a third party with some knowledge of whether a pole and cabinets could go elsewhere? However, maybe it's limited, as we've already heard today, that they would only speak to cell coverage. Did the telecommunications consultant give a view prior to the prior approval decision? I don't know, because I've not been able to find any detail on that. But I'm going to say this then, am I learning from the case? Is the only answer that councillors, probably meaning ward councillors, get their own help to investigate alternative sites? I mean, where are we at with that from what we've heard today? Where is the expertise to understand alternative sites? I've already said that this application is a main full planning application for Monopole, and we can be clear to come at this application today as we do full planning applications, weighing up the pros and cons on material matters. Bolton Council likely served a notice to quit, yes, because of development at Horwich Loco Works. Sorry, not likely, we know that from the paperwork. This is shown in agent and EE documentation on 0741418. Was the notice to quit served with plenty of time for EE to find another site? Yes, it was. Did something interrupt a plan that would likely satisfy the community of Horwich and councillors? Yes, it did. It was acquisition issues. The applicant made clear that they weren't able to progress with the industrial site, as I outlined earlier as I started to speak, the Stirling industrial site, because they've said that was acquisition issues. And let me, sorry, I'm getting used to not using paper. Forgive me, Chairman. I'm not surprised. I'm slightly stuck. I'm nearly there. So yes, yes. So they weren't able to progress at the industrial site. Did the council highway, with no acquisition issues, which it doesn't have, then get chosen? Yes, it did. Did a place on the council highway that does not disturb properties by not being in front of them get chosen? No, it did not. Is this a reason that I'm persuaded on material matters not to support this application today? Yes, it is. Fowler Industrial Estate, I've learned today, is owned by Bolton Council. Thanks for that information. But if acquisition issues were raised at Stirling Industrial Site, not being able to question the applicant at all about the work that they've done on this, where when they were going for the prior approval, why they weren't looking at other sites, for example, I wanted to ask them, explore with them, you know, why they ended up just honing in on a council highway. Was it because of acquisition issues at one site? They thought it wasn't worth asking. at other sort of sites that are not owned in the way that the council owns the highway, and that would be easy for them. The applicant is now proposing to slightly move the monopole and equipment cabinets a few metres along from the proposed application site. However, it is felt that everything will still be immediately in front of the same residential properties. So I'm persuaded presently on the position of refusal today on material matters, and I'm proposing that. And the reason for refusal is that it does contravene policy CG3 of Bolton's core strategy. The proposed 20-metre high monopole and wraparound cabinets at base would appear incongruous and a dominant feature that would be harmful to the residential setting in front of those properties and out of scale with its surroundings. And I make that case again. Horwich is a beautiful area, and surely we should look to find a place that does not have to be in front of residential properties like this application is. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Ayub, before we lost you, you indicated you wanted to ask a question of officers. You still want to ask that question? Councillor Ayub? We appear to have lost Councillor Ayub again. Councillor Wright wishes to speak. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. I think everything's been pretty much said, especially by previous councillors. There is a demand for ultra-fast broadband. It is coming, but the problem is with these current 4G masts, they're not big enough to carry all the equipment, and you need heavier, bigger foundations to carry the heavier poles. My concern is that this is described as an upgrade when clearly it's not. How far do we go before we say it's no longer an upgrade? Do we get twice as fat, twice the size? It just keeps adding and adding to it. So I'm concerned that, again, residents aren't being listened to, and we're just pandering to these large multinational companies and letting them just put these poles up wherever they like. There is room, as has been mentioned, across the road near Rivington Coop Meats and Fowler Industrial Estate, and I feel it may cost EE a bit more money to run the cables across the road, but I feel that would be a suitable location. This is I feel a new application, not sneaking it in as an upgrade. And I would be happy to propose refusal on this on the grounds that it's too close to residential properties and the clutter of cabinets. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Ayub, do you still wish to ask a question of officers? And is your microphone on, if that is the case?
Yeah, can you hear me now, John?
We can hear you now.
Thank you for that. Actually, I didn't leave the meeting. It was a correction I lost. The part of my question has been asked by Councillor Sherrington about the cabinet. I wonder if an officer can actually answer my question. I wanted to ask this question to applicant, but applicant is not here. It's the cabinet that I'm concerned about. Additional 6 cabinet. They often got this height of it. Can officer tell me how high they are?
Mr. Allen.
Just bear with me, I'll just have a look at the plans. It doesn't actually say, I'm afraid, but I can try and scale it off for members. It may take a couple of minutes. I can include it in the text, if that's okay.
Please, if you would.
Will do, yeah.
Councillor Sherrington, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Chair. What I wanted to say was that I feel that the applicant has actually not taken any consideration whatsoever in the fact that this was deferred because we felt that a different site should be found. I got the impression that, well, to tell you the truth, I feel like I've been treated with contempt about the fact that they've think, oh, well, it doesn't really matter. We don't really need to do anything at all because we'll just get it through anyway because the government says so. And, you know, it's a sad indictment to the people who actually live in this country that we're actually being ruled in such a way that our views don't count anymore. And I mean, the thing is, where this is situated on that side of the road is residential. On the other side of the road, it's not. It's commercial or it's industrial, and it could just go on the other side of the road. But the thing is that they probably have to pay these people for these sites where they want them to go, because it is commercial, because it is industrial. And I just think that it's like, oh, well, it doesn't matter. We'll stick it a few feet further down and it will be in front of the houses. And as long as we've like made a bit of an effort, that'll suffice. Well, I'm sorry, I just don't see it that way at all. And I think really it should never have been put there in the first place. And I think sometimes it's a case of like, well, the government says you've got to have these, so they can stick them anywhere they want. They can stick them as big as they want and as long as they want, and it'll be fine, because quite simply, we've all got to have them and that's it. Well, I'm sorry, it's people have to live with these things. And as far as I'm concerned, I think the public deserve better than this. And they actually, if we're going to have these things, there should be something written in where these things can go. And this should come from government. They should have something written in where they can go and what kind of situations that they could go to and what size they can go to. All those factors need to be put down in writing so that we've got a document of guidelines of how things should be done. I just think these people have just got free for all, and you know, whatever they want to come up with, we just have to go along with. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not going to go along with this, and I can't accept it. So I will be supporting Councillor Hayes' refusal. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you. Before I call Councillor Peel, there is a message from Mr. Allen. New cabinets, Councillor Ayub, new cabinets will range from 1.7 metres in height to 1.95 metres in height.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Can we come then to Councillor Peel, please?
Thanks, Chair. There's not a lot really to add, especially to Councillor Hayes' quite forensic pulling apart of this application. It was really interesting to listen to, especially the arguments in relation to previous permission, which was permitted development, as opposed to now, which is full planning application, which is, it's an interesting one. So I'm not going to add to anything of that. I just wanted to comment really that Councillor Wright said something about 5G is now with us, and it is going to happen across the country because it's clearly a high government agenda. But what frustrates us as planning members is, you know, I mean, the government should be, Councillor Sherrington's right, they should be a lot clearer about what their intentions are. And if they're going to, if planning committees are just going to pay lip service to something that they are going to push through, then they should at least be more upfront about it. As far as I'm concerned, back in 2000, we had, I think it was second generation, when I first came on the planning committee, second generation monopoles and lattice masts, and we were fighting against them at that time, and then the legislation, I think, was changed, so basically stops us from refusing them, and that's how things have developed. But as far as I'm concerned, the only planning consideration really for the sighting of a mast has got to be cell coverage. That's the only thing that applicants can argue, because we're laymen, and it's not as simple as looking at a map and saying, oh, why can't you put it there? It isn't just about distance on basic geography. It's about cell coverage, and moving a mast, 100 yards one way can really alter coverage. And that's why we have the consultants. That's why we hire in technical consultants to advise us on that, and that doesn't appear to have happened. So we're left with an issue here. Is the only reason that they want this mast in this location is because it's quite easy to access from a vehicle and therefore easy to maintain. There could be a number of reasons why they prefer this location, and until we have our consultants actually checking out cell coverage in alternative locations, we're still left in the dark. And that's a real pity, because that's so important when we deal with these, and we will deal with more of them in the future. There'll be quite a few of them coming towards us. So happy to support refusal, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Peel. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I've not been on the committee for the last 18 months, but I've been on it for a significant time previous to that. And we always previously, so please, if it's changed since I was last on, we always discuss precedents. So if there was a house used to be there, the precedence is gone, then the probability you can have another house. If there's a dormer, if we have a dormer in this street, then the precedence is gone. That next thing, it'd be very hard to object to that house having a dormer, that sort of precedence. So for me, the precedence has gone on this site because there is already a pole. So that's why I find it very difficult to see what the grounds for refusal are. I understand that there's more cabinets, etc. But if we want Bolton to be a technical Bolton, a digital Bolton, as Councillor White indicated, not necessarily in agreement with what I'm going to say, but we need the appropriate coverage. And I agree with Councillor Peel to a certain extent. If our consultants are not doing what they're supposed to do with regards to coverage, etc., then maybe we should be looking at other consultants. But that is the sort of information that we need to facilitate us to make a sound judgment with regards to this. Because if they could move it across the road and the coverage is the same, then maybe we should be pushing for that. But that's not what they've said. But in this case, this is very different from the applications that members have quoted in Great Lever and in the Kearsley precinct. There is already an existing pole and cabinets there. So I think it'll be very, I'm sure that the committee is going to refuse it, but I think there'll be definitely grounds for appeal from the applicant, as the precedent has already been set. So I'll be voting in support of the application.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. I have no other indication of speakers, and therefore it has been moved and seconded that this application should be refused. Members therefore again are voting for refusal or against refusal.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Ayoub.
For.
Councillor Connor.
For.
Councillor Darvish.
For.
Councillor Dean.
Against.
Councillor Howarth.
For.
Councillor Hayes.
For.
Councillor Hornby.
For.
Councillor Mistry.
For.
Councillor Morgan.
Against.
Councillor Peel.
For.
Councillor Radcliffe.
Against.
Councillor Sanders.
For.
Councillor Sherrington.
For.
Councillor Walsh.
Against?
Councillor Wilkinson?
For.
Councillor Wright?
For.
That application is refused.
Thank you very much. We come then to the final application this afternoon, which is for the Church Hotel, 61 Church Road, Kersley.
Chair, can I just
check that we've got councillors Cunningham and Newell online?
Chair, can I just check that? I'm going to ring Councillor Newell now because she's actually dialing in as she's an objector rather than a ward councillor. Just bear with me, thank you. Chair, I can confirm that Councillor Newell is just about to ring in.
Thank you. We will await her arrival.
Chair, I can confirm now that I've just admitted Councillor Newell into the meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. Riggs. Can I make it clear that Councillor Cunningham is speaking as ward councillor, Councillor Newell is speaking as an objector? Mr. Allen, please.
Thank you, Chair. The application proposes the conversion of the former public house to form 14 apartments comprising of 13 one-bedroom units and 1 two-bedroom unit. The principle of the loss of the public house unit.
Councillor Cunningham is speaking as ward councillor, Councillor Newell is speaking as an objector. Mr. Allen, please. Thank you, Chair. Can we just check that my microphones are off, please? We've got some feedback.
Right.
One two-bedroom unit. The principle of the loss of the public house unit. I just check, Councillor Newell, you've not got the live broadcast on, have you, behind you?
Turn it off.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
All right, Mr. Allen, please.
Okay, shall I start again, or?
If you would, please.
Okay, no, that's fine, no worries. Thank you, Chair. The application proposes a conversion of the former public house to form 14 apartments comprised of 13 one-bedroom units and 1 two-bedroom unit. The principle of the loss of the public house use has already been established via a previous change of use permission in 2019. This made the provision for the use of the site for offices and residential accommodation above. To facilitate the conversion, a number of extensions are proposed: a 2-storey side extension, a first floor rear and a dormer to the rear roof plane as well, the design of which have all been amended to improve the cohesiveness of the development proposal. 14 car parking spaces are proposed at the rear with access from the side of the property. The size of the proposed units meets the nationally described space standards. There is, however, a shortfall in the private amenity space located at the rear. There is also a shortfall in the interface distance between the front of the building and the row of terraced properties on the opposite side of the road. But as this relationship is already existing and the use of the hotel, the existing use, and also the approved use of the site are all key material considerations in the determination of the application. Interface distances to the side and rear of the building meet the council's guidance. Highway matters are covered in detail in paragraphs 36 to 44. Members will see from the pictures that Church Road is a narrow road and is acknowledged to have congestion issues, especially at school drop-off and pick-up times. Highway engineers are of the view that the extant permission for the change of use of the building to offices and residential would generate more traffic than the 14 apartments proposed here. The application is before committee for decision at the request of Councillor Newell, and there also has been in excess of 6 letters of objection from local residents. Officers consider that the benefits of the development are considered to outweigh any harm identified, and the proposal is therefore recommended for approval. I'd just like to draw members' attention to the late list, where there is one additional objection which has been received and reported. Also not reported in the late list are some additional comments from highways engineers, who've also recommended a review of traffic regulation orders in the area, in particular at the to the east of the application site, to facilitate safe access and egress from the site. Thank you.
So can I now invite Councillor Cunningham to speak? Councillor Cunningham, remind you, you've got 5 minutes to address committee.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. I must draw your attention to the glaringly misleading narrative used in the planning officer's report, and it's perpetuated in documentation from other officers and consultees, around which much of the mitigation is offered in relation to the shortcomings and flaws in this application and on which it relies. It is repeatedly proffered as a reason for acceptance and mitigation that the application before you is better than the alternate of the extant permission at the site for the change of use of the building to offices and residential. Please be very clear, this is a red herring. The truth is this: at the start of this whole process, which goes back many months now to the first application by this particular developer, there was a public meeting held, well attended by all the residents, including myself. The developers were in attendance to present their plans and answer questions. When questioned by residents regarding the application for the offices and flat, the developers categorically stated that this was a technical move to allow them to obtain funding and get things moving, but they assured residents they had no intention of ever converting the building to offices, and they intended to demolish the existing buildings and replace with a new build high quality apartments. Therefore, I now ask you to disregard all previous opinions you may have formed on this application based on this misleading narrative. Let's look now at the intrinsic flaws in this application, highlighted in the documentation you have received from other consultees and contributors, including myself. In relation to Highways comments, I would draw attention to the fact that for much of the document, it incorrectly refers to the site location as 61 Church Street, Farnworth. The correct designation location is 61 Church Road, Kersley, and it should be noted that Church Street, Farnworth, which is a cul-de-sac, runs roughly parallel to Church Road, Kersley. Whilst the comments correctly identify congestion as a problem identified in relation to previous applications, the reference to a rough ticks calculation doesn't do justice to the magnitude of the actual problems encountered in relation to additional vehicle movements on a daily basis at school and nursery drop-off and pick-up times. My own concerns are mainly around parking, congestion and road safety due to the proximity to the junction with Lord Street, which is a staggered junction, and the 2 primary schools and nursery. The access road to the development is too small, and there's been no amendment to the original plans to relieve the junction, which was a key requirement of residents, and dependent on the developer purchasing a small area of rest land to the front of the adjacent houses. I also have concerns regarding the effects on water pressure and wastewater drainage, adding pressure onto the existing utilities. But in addition to these, I'm very aware that other residents, particularly those living closer to the site, have other concerns that they may wish to raise or have already sent in during this consultation. And I really do ask that the committee take each of these seriously, because they have raised some really, really relevant points. Let's look now at the other contributors that you'll have received documentation. The Environmental Health Officer commented in regards to the amended application. It doesn't look like they've changed the layout very much. There are still communal stairs next to bedrooms and living areas above bedrooms, and then goes on to confirm previous comments still apply in relation to the internal design and avoiding incompatible uses as recommended in British Standard 8233. The Conservation Officer originally commented that the flat 4 appeared to have a bathroom floating in a living area, and that the large dormer to the rear would appear bulky and overly dominant, and later submitted further comments that this is probably the best we're likely to achieve, even though some of the units are substandard, but probably would have to offset this against the reuse of a historic building. Please note this. This building is not a listed building, and up until the latest amendment to the application, everyone was quite happy to have this demolished. I think someone's already commented on the amenity. It should be noted the distance between the building and the applicant, if this was a new build, which was originally proposed, would have had to have been 21 metres, but the actual space is only 11 metres. Attempts are made to mitigate this by referring to it as now as an existing building, negating the requirement. However, what is not considered in respect of this is that may have been acceptable historically under the original use of a public house, but this application has to be considered in the light of a change of use, which it now has for actual multiple accommodation. There have been many concerns expressed regarding drainage of the site, and I've read the local flood authority stated that they were unable to support the application due to the absence of a sustainable drainage strategy or scheme. I see no crime survey documentation from GMP, although they recommended a full site survey, but there's not actually been one prepared with the documentation. There's also grave concerns from residents regarding the proposed bin storage with twice weekly collection and the noxious smells and odours and rat infestation that this may lead to. I urge the members of the committee to do the right thing and maintain the established community in this part of Kersley and reject this application.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. You finished just on your 5 minutes there. We have an objector to speak, and this is Councillor Newall, who is speaking not as a ward councillor but as an objector. You have 3 minutes to address the meeting. I don't need to remind you that fact, I'm sure, and then to take any questions from members of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. The residents of Church Road do not oppose development of this site. In fact, they look forward to this site being developed in an appropriate way, but they do oppose this development on the grounds of overlook, privacy, traffic and several other issues. It's important to acknowledge that this site is not part of the allocation plan. The report states that if this were a new build, the interface of 11 metres would not be acceptable. The interface is actually 10 metres short of the requirement, that is 30 foot. And although this application constantly refers to the fact that this is a conversion, there are no less than 4 extensions proposed to convert the development. So a great part of this development will actually be new build, yet the application seeks to mitigate that wouldn't be acceptable for a new build by referring to constraints of a historical building. It's not a historical building, it's an old pub which dominates the houses on Church Road. At least when it was a pub, it was governed by the terms of its licence with regard to noise pollution. The obscure glazing argument is unconvincing. To say that someone could not only overlook if stood directly next to a window is an unsatisfactory premise, as this is exactly where someone would stand if they had malicious intent. And what about when windows are open? The opportunity for overlook is there exactly because the interface distance is too short. And to cite previous use of the pub as mitigation for the overlook, again, is a failed argument. As has already been established, this lack of interface would not be acceptable in a new development. But even so, previous development only had 1 living room, 1 study bedroom at first floor level. This proposes to double the amount of accommodation and opportunity for overlook. The 2-storey extension is a stairwell which gives direct visual access into number 64 from a distance of 11 metres. The residents say this level of intrusion is unacceptable. And finally, on this topic, to the western aspect, windows look directly into the classroom and playground of the primary school. Surely this is unacceptable too. The issues of highways have been dealt with, and it's a very big problem. I will just say that if this application is approved, it will make the problems there infinitely worse. Time and time again today, I've heard committees say that residents are not being heard. I would respectfully ask the committee today to please listen to the residents and refuse this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Newell. I have two indicative questions at the moment. Councillor Howarth.
Thank you, Chair. I want to ask about the business of the build of this second floor that you've talked about, and that's where the roof is. And of course, there's a side extension going east, isn't there? Yeah. So I'd appreciate just knowing a bit more. You've already spoken somewhat on overlook and privacy, but anything more you can say on that? Can I just add to the question, because it's a similar thing? Is there anything you'd want to say about overbearing? You know, I've looked at the elevations and there's windows there, of course, on that second floor. Do you have a view on overbearing as well as overlook and privacy? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Firstly, the extensions. The extension to the east, which is stairwell, the two-storey extension. This is really intrusive because it's a stairwell, it will be lit, and it's directly opposite the living room and bedroom window of number 64, I think it is, number 64 Church Road. And you've got the opportunity there for people to be in that stairwell that may not even be residents, maybe visitors or maybe delivering things. And it's 11 metres. I mean, I really wanted a site visit to this location, because if you went there, you'd see how imposing the pub is on the terrain. I mean, these houses and that pub were built in a different era. When they were first built, one side of the street wasn't lined in cars, obviously, and the pub just exited onto the street. There's a stables next door. It was a different time. But now it's the 21st century. We're expecting it to sort of just meld into what's required now, and it can't. It is a very imposing building. It dominates the houses opposite. Now, to say, well, it's already there and you know, we have to put up with it as it is. Well, it is already there, but there's an opportunity here to demolish this building and build an appropriate development for this area. The second floor, the dormers, again, you know, it's just dominated. It just makes the building bigger. It dominates. You've got lights up there. You're going to have lights on in the stairwell, presumably 24 hours, you know, for safety issues. It is a very large, intimidating building compared to the terraced houses opposite. And, you know, the overlook, you cannot get past the fact that the interface is less than half of what it should be. It's a very small area, and I fear that if this development goes ahead, there'll be lots of problems, both for the present residents of Church Road and new residents within the new development.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hayes.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. Firstly, about the traffic situation there, which we've heard from several people is very bad. Are there any existing waiting restrictions in this immediate vicinity? That's the first question. The second one is about bins. Now, I'm not sure whether we've got a supporter here or not, but I'll ask you the question. Or I may have to ask a similar one to the supporter if there is. Is it going to be communal bins, or are we going to have individual bins? If the collection is from the front, which I believe is a very narrow pavement, you could, in some weeks, if they're separate bins, be talking about 28 bins on the opposite side of the street to the cars. Now, is that the situation, or are we talking about communal bins? Do you know?
Thank you. Well, no, I don't. And this is why it's a concern for the residents about bin storage. The only thing the report mentions is that they've swapped the bin storage around with the cycle storage because of infestation and smells. But you're absolutely right. If these bins are being brought to the front, because you wouldn't get a bin wagon into the back of the development, if they were being brought to the front, they would have to be obviously parked on the pavement. The pavement is very narrow there. I'd say it's only 1 metre wide, if that. So you're going to have, while the bins are out at the front, pedestrians walking on the road. And as has been stated before, this is in the middle of 2 primary schools. There are 2 primary schools, yards on either side of this area. And then on Lord Street, there's a nursery. So you've got a constant situation of parents taking children to and from school and nursery. So you could end up with a situation where people are actually making it worse than it is now, because people would actually be walking onto the road. With regard to waiting restrictions, there are some CROs at the corners, the corner of Lord Street and Church Road, but obviously residents park in front of their houses. But the problem with this is where the exit is going to be from this development, you're actually creating a crossroads with Lord Street. And if you come down Lord Street, turn left into Church Road, you actually have to come out into the junction to turn before you can actually see what's coming, because of the way it is. So you get a constant situation, and I've actually done this, of cars having to reverse down the road because the car coming the other way can't back up. So you're reversing down the street with cars parked on one side and people walking with children on the pavement on the other side. It's horrendous. And the exit from this development, if the car is parked opposite number 64, you could not turn right without mounting the pavement opposite. You can't, because it's just not wide enough. Now, it does say in the report that they're proposing to widen the exit, but I don't see how that's possible, because on one side you've got a brick boundary wall from the other property on the eastern side, and then on the western side it is where this 2-storey extension's going to be. So you're going to have the same situation that you have on Lord Street, that people will have to come out into the junction before they can see whether the road is clear. It's just a recipe for disaster. I'm very, very disappointed that Highways only did a desktop exercise with this. And if the only grounds would have been traffic on this, I would have respectfully asked, could you consider deferment? Because it needs to be inspected when schools are working fully, not as they have been for the last few months, because in the morning, in the afternoon, it's horrendous there. It's a cut through. It's part of a much wider problem in this area that I do know Highways are aware of. It's a cut through to miss out the roundabout, basically. And if you put restrictions in this area, you'd move the problem further up the road. But to add this development into the mix will make a bad situation infinitely worse.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the question therefore from Councillor Wilkinson to officers, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 questions, if I may, regarding the report, and that is paras 9, 10 and 11, where we refer to the 5-year supply. I'm just a bit concerned that we've just had nearly over 1,200 houses approved for potential development, i.e. Bolton Phase 2 and Bolton Estate, and whether that's been taken into consideration, because I would have thought an extra 1,200 plus would have had a big impact on the 5-year supply. And my other question is in relation to para 32, pollution control, where they very briefly refer to the layout of the actual proposed bed flats, etc. That seems a little bit vague, that report, to me, section of the report. We've had other applications in the past where we've seen some pretty appalling layouts. I know the government's changed the rules to allow almost anything digitally converted. But I am concerned that that is just very briefly dealt with, and that we could end up with a conversion, if it was approved, of incompatible uses for residents in the building. Thank you.
Alan, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to answer your questions, Councillor. The first one about the 5-year land supply and whether we can take into consideration Bolton, say, and Hulton Park. We can, in terms of obviously the 5-year housing land supply, that has to be deliverable within a 5-year period. Obviously, Bolton's Hay, that's, yeah, we could include that, but obviously in terms of the I suppose the deficit or the or lack of 5-year land supply, that, you know, I can't remember, is it 170 houses or so? That isn't going to make up the deficit. And Hulton Park, obviously, that's reliant on Peel Holdings being awarded the Ryder Cup in terms of commencement, and I think from recollection that even if they started tomorrow, there was only 200-300 properties, I think, from recollection, that were going to be started with or completed within 5 years, because obviously the majority of it would be on where housing would be on the Western Fields, which is where the media centre, etc., would be. So yeah, I mean, Bolton's Hay in itself isn't going to change the position outlined in paragraphs 9 to 11. In terms of the layout, paragraph 32, yeah, I mean, in terms of flats, conversions and changes of use to residential, we do often get this comment from pollution control officers with regard to incompatible living rooms and stairwells, etc., kitchens. We do try to, as part of the planning, try to get those rooms more compatible, if not wholly compatible. But obviously, what officers are saying, as you should be aware, is that notwithstanding planning, matters of like soundproofing, etc., are covered by the building regulations. So it isn't necessarily required from a planning perspective to have, if mitigation can be resolved in other regimes.
Thank you. That's all the questioning. We come therefore to Councillor Hayes, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The point's been made that this site isn't in the plan, but I don't think anybody's got any objection to the principle of it being used for housing. It's quite a sensible principle in this area. But I would argue it is a massive overdevelopment, People have talked about the merits of the building, and a lot of the problems we have is because it's difficult to convert this building into something acceptable, and we have a problem with the interface distances. Looking at it, I don't think there's any merit in that building at all. I know beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but it wouldn't exactly upset me if that building was knocked down. And that would seem to be, looking at the map of the site, would seem a sensible way to look at it for housing. If you look at the semi-detached houses to the right on the map, by using simple calculation, this site would seem to be very sensible to another 2 pairs of semis going on, which would solve the problems of the interface distances. It would increase traffic by a very minimal amount. I think to have only an 11-metre interface is totally unacceptable for people on the other side of the road, to be honest. Totally and utterly unacceptable. We've got the question about the bins. I don't know whether they're communal bins. I'm assuming if they're individual bins, that there'll be very few green bins there, although people may well have food containers. But there would quite probably on the recycling weeks, there could be up to 14 beige bins and up to 14 maroon bins there, plus any food containers. And we've heard that the footpath there is about 1 metre wide. People tend to put their bins out early sometimes because they may be going to work, hopefully. So that is another problem. It would obscure views of traffic in a road where there's already difficulty. So, Chairman, for a whole host of reasons, overdevelopment of the site, insufficient interface, insufficient amenity space, I would like to move refusal of this objective of this application.
Councillor Hayes. Councillor Peel.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is one of them applications where at first glance you look at it and you think it's fine, and when you drill down into the details, there's quite a bit of it's like Pandora's box. There's quite a bit of mess actually comes out when you actually examine it closely. I think the starting point as ever is any windfall site on a previously developed piece of land is good. For our housing targets, it's always got to be good. We as a council strategically rely on windfall sites in order to help with our numbers, and 17 here, 20 there, 5 there, it all adds up, and so it is important. And I'm glad that both ward councillors who spoke, Curzon councillors who spoke, seem to accept the principle of development on this site, and I think that's very healthy. That they have done that because that is really important. My big issue on this, once you cut through everything, I think my big issue on this is the interface distances, and it's an issue, I think, probably an issue with our policy actually, because we discussed issues of precedent in the last application. There's a mast already there. It's going to be replaced with another mast that's bigger, etc. Is there a precedent there, or is there not? And technically, in planning terms, there is precedent. And technically, in planning terms, there is a precedent here because there's an existing building. You can't change those interface distances. They are 11 metres. If you're going to convert this building to whatever you convert it to, it's going to be 11 metres. There's no getting around that. And that's why officers have said, well, it should be 21, but it's 11, so we'll accept that because the building's already there. But yeah, I think that's a really iffy argument, to be honest, because if this was a new build, if that was a blank piece of land and we were asked to put up this building as it is now, it would not only would it be refused, it'd be recommended for refusal. And the problem with this application is, yes, it acknowledges that there are existing windows that overlook properties 11 metres away, but I don't think it pays enough attention to the fact that the applicant wants to add the amount of overlooking windows. He wants to go up to a second story and have even more overlooking windows, to such an extent that the poor people, if this goes through, the poor people who sat in those living rooms have to actually stand up to see out of their window, because officers, to get around these interface problems, are proposing obscured glass halfway up. I mean, that must be horrendous. If you're sat in an armchair and you basically can't see out your window, you've got to stand up to see out. I mean, that in itself says that officers acknowledge there's a problem. So yeah, I think if the building's not worthy of retention, a better scheme perhaps would be demolition and a new build. But I'd be happy for a conversion of this building, but without the second story, because they're just making a bad situation worse. If they went for a simple conversion of the existing building, I'm not sure, to be honest, we'd have a lot of. I don't think we'd have a leg to stand on in any subsequent appeal. But the fact that this is making an existing situation far worse by cramming in too many apartments, by going up to a second floor, is unnecessary. You don't need to do that. So I'm very happy to second refusal. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Peel. Councillor Sherrington.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened to what's been said, and you know, I do have some concerns because I do think that we could finish up with being a town that is full of nothing but brand new Billy Boot cases all over the place. Because quite simply, if they knock this building down and they put something else up, it could be apartments, it might be even a couple of more story higher, and also it's just so it could get the distances right. So therefore, you know, you would finish up with more probably apartments there, and also it would look like everything else. And I do think that there is a concern nationally that we're finishing up where we've got everything looking the same. And it, you know, you go down streets, you go to different towns, and everything's the same. You do need your sat nav, because if you didn't have your sat nav, you won't even know what town you're in. And I think it's a real concern when people are trying the best to maybe save some of these buildings. And as far as your distances are concerned, is that if this would be a accommodation instead of being a pub, the buildings that have been built since would have had to have their distances right, so they would have been built further away. So, you know, you can't have it always. And I do think we'll keep rambling on about the second story, but the thing is, part of that, it was already there on a second story on this pub. And I just find it quite bizarre that there is such a big noise made of that, when last meeting we actually had these the accommodation, single accommodation being put forward at the Moss Roads, and it was you know, we had the councillor said, oh well, they really needed this accommodation, even though it didn't come up to government standards, to the you know, national standards. They were smaller, but that seemed all right, you know, let's go for that. These actually do come up to the standard. And I do think that if somebody's trying their best to actually give the right accommodation, they actually got car parking for each and every one of these single accommodation. And I just find it bizarre that people can't accept that that this could be a good thing rather than a bad thing. And I mean, the thing is, with these people who live around there, they've got this accommodation there that is exactly the same distance as it's been while it's been a pub. So I don't know why they want it to be demolished and put something else up there. I just don't understand, because if you finish up with something else there, fair enough, you might get a bit more space between you and them, but you won't get a better building. You know, and and I get fed up with everybody thinking that all old buildings should be got rid of, and it really does really worry me which way direction that we're going in. So this accommodation comes up to national guidelines. Fair enough, the distances are not right, but then again, that is to do with the fact that the houses that were built there since this pub was built should have probably had bigger distances away from it. So I'm going to support this this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Howard.
Thanks, Chair. Just briefly, considering all the material matters, the things that stand out to me, listening to all of the contributors, is that, well, I did raise the issue of overbearing because of the second floor. Overlook and privacy has been raised. I'm persuaded on that because we've got this additional floor with windows and so on. I'm persuaded, though, on two other things in particular. Perhaps I should have said these first, which is that amenity, there's no getting away from it. The report makes it clear it's down by 40% of what is the policy of expectation for 14 apartments. It's down by 40%. And then interface, again, against policy on this, is down by 50%. So those last two, you know, are quite significant. They are significant. I think if I remember, a colleague before spoke about amenity, or was it flat size? Anyway, amenity was an issue that we considered on the application. Another application that was in Kersley, where my colleague had just been referring to, and I don't think that then was down by the same level. Anyway, I mean, it's those material issues that are persuading me presently to not support the application. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. Just turn my camera on. Yes, I have to agree with members who are against this application. Standards have changed. Central government policy is producing some real rubbish developments and some appalling living conditions. That's up to the government. What we do in Bolton on this particular planning committee is to ensure that we have good development wherever possible, that it fits into the areas and is of good quality, design, space, amenity, etc. This is a clapped out pub. Now, I've seen pubs, and we all have, all over the town, either demolished, converted for residential or commercial uses. Got loads in West Orton. We had the Red Lion, which was quite an attractive and historical pub, demolished and replaced with social housing, sheltered social housing. So I'm not against getting rid of things when they need to be got rid of to make something better. And I have to say, I've seen the photographs of this building. I know where it is, and it's nothing special. I'm sorry, it is nothing special. And when you add all the additional issues which come from this conversion of squashing 14 apartments into this building with additional extensions, which create additional problems for the residents across the road, and those properties have probably been there some time before planning regulations, so the distances obviously didn't apply when they were built, otherwise they wouldn't have been built. And as Councillor Pearce pointed out, I mean, obscured glass for people who would live in these flats. Are we really being serious about that? That is an appalling recommendation to put somebody in obscured glass. It's like being in your bathroom with obscured glass. It's absolutely crazy. And I think all the other issues which come with this about bins, about highways, about additional impact from extensions, overlooking, the amenity space, as Councillor Howarth has just mentioned, and the point I raised with Mr. Allen about the conversion of this building, and it fails to meet proper standards. I'm sorry, it just gets a big thumbs down. So I shall be supporting refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, not to repeat what my colleagues have said, I think Councillor Howard made the point I wanted to make about the amenity space, which is pretty much non-existent. I definitely support what Councillor Cunningham said as the ward councillor and what the objection stated. So I think, well, I know I'll be supporting refusal, Chair.
Thank you. I have no other speakers listed, so it has been proposed and seconded that this application is refused. The members are therefore invited to vote for refusal or against refusal. Mrs. Riggs, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Ayoub. For. Councillor Connor.
For.
Councillor Darvish.
For.
Councillor Dean.
For.
Councillor Howarth.
For.
Councillor Hayes.
For.
Councillor Hornby.
For.
Councillor Mistry.
For.
Councillor Morgan.
For.
Councillor Peel.
For.
Councillor Radcliffe.
For.
Councillor Sanders.
For.
Councillor Sherrington.
Against.
Councillor Walsh.
For.
Councillor Waters. Oh, sorry, it's not here. Councillor Wilkinson.
For.
Councillor Wright.
For.
The application is refused.
Thank you very much indeed. That brings us to the end of the applications. At the back of the report bundle, you will see there are 2 decisions from appeals, which are there for information. Can I thank members for your attendance and advise you that the special meeting that had provisionally been arranged for the 3rd of September is not now necessary. Planning officers advised me, Vice Chairman, that the reports are not ready, and therefore there will not be an additional meeting on the 3rd of September. You can find something else to do with that afternoon. And I therefore thank everyone for their attendance, and if when we close the meeting, members wish to stay for an informal conversation, I'd be happy to have that discussion. But we should now end the live broadcast, please. Thank you very much indeed.